Welcome to Who Are You? The Bobcats You know, the stories you don't. I'm your host, Joel Vanner, inside the podcast studio at Quinnipiac University for episode 7. And my guest today is Guido Lang. Welcome to the show, Guido.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I guess you could probably tell by the name of the show what my first question, or maybe you've seen a past episode, what my first question to my guests are. And that first question is, who are you?
All right. So Guido Lang, as you mentioned, I'm a professor here in the Business Analytics and Information Systems Department at the School of Business. I've been here for quite some time, joined in 2012. So yeah, it's been a while, but here and excited to be on the show.
So tell us a little bit about your journey to Quinnipiac. You've been here 13 years, but how'd you get here?
Originally, if you can't tell by now with my accent, not exactly from around here. I'm from Germany, Düsseldorf in particular, in the northwest of the country. Grew up there, did high school and all of that. But already in my teenage years, basically, I got involved in entrepreneurship. I dabbled in photography first, and then I got into graphic design. And then the internet was about to take off. It was the late 90s. And I started teaching myself web design because, that was what the cool kids were doing at the time. And I was just getting into it. And so I got together with a few friends of mine and we started building websites for small companies in Germany. And that grew because it was a time when the internet was just taking off. So there was lots of demand. Companies were saying, we got to get on this. Similar to what we see now with AI, it was the same time, but just different internet in general. And so we built that company, grew it over 5 years, did lots of mistakes, obviously, because honestly, I was 17 when I started. I had long hair till here. It was green. I was a punk. It was wild years. Lots of mistakes, but ultimately sold the company. And then that was my experience, my first experience really with entrepreneurship. And then I went to study. I did then afterwards moved out west, far west to LA. Did my Grad at Cal State Long Beach in business. And sort of then for the first time I was able to reflect on all the mistakes that we did make with that company. But it was great being in the classroom and being able to relate what I was reading and what the professors were saying to my experiences.
What was that like when you were teaching yourself web design and starting that first company? What was that like? You were kind of charting uncharted waters, right? And you were young, right? Didn't have a lot of experience behind you there. What was that like?
Well, the beauty of being young is that you also don't really care, right? And especially when you're in high school or then later in your studies, you don't have much risk, especially in the field of digital, right? Where, you're investing time, you're learning skills, you're building something. So the biggest risk you're taking is wasting your time. And so it's not as scary as when you're, setting up shop where you have to make a large investment. It's a time investment, yes, but so there wasn't that much risk. And but it was still scary. And at the same time, it felt great. Being as young as I was at the time, to be in a boardroom making a presentation to folks who are really excited and interested to hear what I had to say. Because again, it was the internet; no one knew what was going on. And at that time, whenever you have these new technologies coming in, you can position yourself as an expert, even though you may have just a year of experience. But all of a sudden, you're an expert, and people will listen to you. And that was actually quite empowering and fun.
So California, tell me a little bit about California, what your favorite part was, and what your studies were.
Yeah, so I was at Cal State Long Beach, as I was saying, undergrad in business management in particular. To be honest with you, I chose to go to LA because I wanted to have a change of scenery, I wanted to have some good weather, surfing, that kind of stuff. So actually throughout my life, oftentimes I made decisions, not so much of like what I want to do, but where I wanted to be. So that was one of those where I thought, it'd be really cool to be in LA for a few years. So that brought me out to LA. And it was a great experience, honestly. I mean, the environment was great. It was a big change for me. I loved the surfing, loved the vibes of the people. Wasn't so much in love with the traffic, but it's LA.
Yeah. And then after that, where'd you go next?
So after that, actually, I went back to Europe, this time to Switzerland. I got my master's degree in information systems at the University of Bern. So I was there for a few years, lived in Bern, also in Geneva, which is very international as an environment. So I really liked that. And also during my graduate studies, I ended up being a visiting student first at the University of Hong Kong, or Hong Kong University, HKU, in Hong Kong, which was great because I was able to explore that part of the world, which was fascinating. Hong Kong at the time really was, it still is a crossroads of Asia, but it was a different environment than it is today, but still an exciting place. And then I was a visiting student briefly also at Harvard University. And that was my master's program. So great experience all around as well.
What was it like balancing all of that traveling, also learning and taking courses and doing everything that comes along with that? How did you balance that?
Well, I love travel and I love being in new environments. It energizes me. And the university, luckily, the University of Bern, they were very much supportive of that. So they want students, just similar to Quinnipiac, honestly, right? We encourage students going abroad, and the same was true for me back then at that university. They really wanted students to do that, so they were flexible in terms of like accepting transfer credits when you were abroad and all that stuff. So it was rather easy, but yeah, and exciting.
And now to the East Coast, New York City for your doctorate. Tell us a little bit about that, and then how you ended up here at Quinnipiac.
Yeah. So as a matter of fact, I didn't actually make it straight to the East Coast. You would think. So I was finished with my master's program, and as I was in my master's program, I didn't even know what would come afterwards, to be honest with you. I didn't have a plan of going into a PhD, going into my master's. It was rather, I was in that master's program and had to make some money. And as a German citizen, when you are in Switzerland, a different country, you can't just work. Similar to when you're here international, so you can't just work anywhere. The only place I could work was on campus. And so I wanted to make some money, so I looked for jobs on campus. And the one opening I saw at the time was as a teaching and research assistant at the Institute of Information Systems at the university. And so I applied and ultimately got the job. But through that, I was able to, for the first time, sort of see behind the scenes of the university, like, what does it take to prepare lectures? What does it take to do research? What does it even mean? I didn't know anything about research at the time. And so I really fell in love with that environment. I really loved the idea of being able to pursue knowledge, to teach. I really enjoyed the engagement with students. I was able to do some small lectures and tutorial sessions and such. So that got me excited about, going into academia. So I thought, let me get a PhD to be able to do that. But then I applied and I got into the program at CUNY, City University of New York, Baruch College. But before doing that, I had basically a gap here between my master's ended and my PhD started. So without going straight to New York, I actually did a stopover, if you will. I spent some time in Cameroon, in Africa. I was doing volunteering work there, setting up internet labs at schools, at local schools. Basically, that was a time when smartphones weren't around yet, really. So we were using old school phones and connected them to laptops and computers to bring internet access to schools. And then I would teach the teachers some web design, which I knew from my previous work.
Carrying over your past experience
exactly. And then in the afternoons, we would turn this around and make it an internet cafe. So this way, the schools could make some money because ultimately they had to pay for the internet access. So they were using the funds from the internet cafe to pay for that. Anyway, so that was a long story. That ultimately brought me then to New York City for my PhD.
And is there anything in the courses you teach now, thinking back to your first teaching experiences, what do you carry from those into the students that you teach here at Quinnipiac today? Is there any routine or anything in particular that you always remember at the start of a term?
It's not necessarily a routine, but honestly, every time I ask myself, would I want to be in that class, right? Because, to be frank with you, I sat in many boring classes, right? I've seen many boring lectures, and especially in my field, information systems, oftentimes, programming and such is taught in such a dry and boring way, and complicated unnecessarily and very math heavy, and I hated that. And then I experienced, through interaction with other professors, more interactive ways of teaching, and quite frankly, also teaching things myself. I realized that there's better ways of learning, better ways of teaching. So honestly, it's not really a routine, but every time when I do design a class, and I keep redesigning and improving my courses every year, every semester. But I always ask myself, do I want to be a student in that class, and what can I do to make it better?
So your journey here has been quite unique in terms of your teaching experience, et cetera. But you also have a lot of entrepreneurship experiences. Tell us a little bit about those and some lessons learned from that.
Yes, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, I started early on in my teenage years back in Germany, but then I continued that trend. I started another company then later on when ebooks just came about. It was the time when Amazon had just launched the Amazon Kindle, Apple iBook store on the iPad, Barnes & Noble Nook. Those came out. And I literally picked up a Kindle one day in New York City, and I looked for German titles. And there were exactly none available, zero. I looked for Italian titles, French titles, none. Only the large US publishers were available on that platform. So I called up a large German publishing house and said, listen, guys, I'm a German here in the city. I bought a Kindle, but guess what? None of your books are available. What gives? And they told me, well, we're having some technical difficulties. I thought, okay, that's weird. So then the next day I called them back and I make a bit of a lie. I say, listen, guys, I have a company. We can help you figure out how to get your titles into all the different ebooks, ebook retailers, ebook stores here in the US. I didn't have a company, obviously, but I figured if they say yes, we'll figure it out somehow.
Make it up as you go.
Exactly,
right.
exactly. And we said, listen, we take no money up front. We do it on a commission basis. 20%, right, of every book sold goes to us. You've got no risk, right? Our incentives are aligned. And to my surprise, they said yes. So I flew out then to Germany ultimately, and with another a co-founder started this company that became Mintright, a global ebook distribution platform. And yeah, it was a good success, great experiences again along the way, and we ultimately built that out to handle about 100,000 titles across all the different retailers and working mostly with international publishing companies. So yeah.
Wow. And then after that, you switched industries to healthcare.
Yeah. Well, actually, even before healthcare, as an entrepreneur, honestly, I mean, you have successes, but many more failures, to be honest with you. And that's fine because you learn from those. Actually, I think you learn from the failures more than from the successes almost. And so, yeah, so after that, I tried my hand with another co-founder, with another friend of mine at a platform that was there to rent out unused photo and video gear. So living in New York City, I had a few friends that were photographers, videographers, and they have, great equipment, expensive equipment, but they don't use it all the time. So I thought, wouldn't it be great to help them make money off the equipment when they don't use it? So we created a platform that would handle the entire rental process and even insure it so that there will be no risk for them renting out the equipment. Great platform and great co-founder, but at the same time, it failed. It just didn't take off. Ultimately, we learned that while people were telling us, yeah, we would love to make money off the equipment, they weren't really ready to give it out because they were always hoping to get a last-minute deal, or get last-minute photo shoot or something like that. So they just couldn't. We couldn't use it ultimately, and so it didn't take off. Good lessons learned from that as well. But then, thereafter, I finally came into the healthcare space. That is with Metaflow. This is a company we've been around now for I think 6 years. I've been working on that with a co-founder. Metaflow is in essence an inventory and vendor management system. We help healthcare clinics, doctors' offices, and healthcare networks all over the US, but mostly in the Western US, manage the inventory of drug samples and such. And we stumbled into this by chance because my co-founder there, he is a medical device sales rep and pharmaceutical sales rep, and he realized that in many doctors' offices, they have lots and lots of drug samples, which they give out before writing a prescription to a patient. But they realized these drug samples would often have to expire because no one knew how many they had. The pharmaceutical sales reps would bring in too many or too few, and they would run out of them. It was a mess. And looking into that, we realized that it's because the pharma companies had no insight into what the inventory levels were of drug samples at these clinics. So we built a platform that solves that problem, basically giving pharma companies access to the inventory information at the same time, ensuring that whatever is in inventory at the medical office is properly cataloged, so they're in compliance with everything. And we're getting data from the FDA in case any recalls, so we can help with that as well. And yeah, that is Metaflow in a nutshell. That grew starting with drug samples, that when we expanded over time, we realized clinics were using it not just for drug samples, but also for vaccines, especially during COVID vaccine time. They're using it for vaccine management. So we had functionality around that. Then we realized they're using it for devices, medical devices. We expanded to that. So really exciting. I'm the CTO of that. So I handle the whole platform development, security, safety, privacy, all that stuff. I learned a lot about healthcare industry and the various regulations that come with it. Yeah, so that's Metaflow in a nutshell.
And it sounds like throughout all of your entrepreneurship journeys, you've been at the start of something that balloons, right? So web design, the inventory management, healthcare, vaccines, COVID, that really took off. And now AI, you're big into the AI space. Tell me a little bit about your ventures in the AI space.
These days, everybody has to have an AI company, right? I mean, so I couldn't be left behind. But no kidding. So obviously, AI is changing how we do business, right? It's changing every single industry, every single job, and it's going to get it more and more so. And it's also changing what we're doing at Quinnipiac, obviously. But I realized pretty quickly that what we're doing in the classroom here has to change, and what's happening in corporate learning and development has to change likewise. So what I came to realize is that in luxury retail in particular, a lot of time is spent on training the sales associates before they actually go out on the sales floor. And a lot of that training happens in person through role play, where you have one person pretending to be a customer, the other one, being a sales associate in training, and you do role play exercises. And I realized that's something that you can perfectly replicate using AI. You now have video realistic avatars available that you can use with fantastic voice, really facial expressions, really realistic, and you can train them to engage in this sort of back and forth role play. They can be the customer, and at the same time later then you can have feedback be given, automated feedback based on large amounts of training data that we have when it comes to best practices in retail selling. And so we're leveraging that. We're leveraging AI avatars and the data that's available for best practices to help retailers, particularly luxury retailers, improve how they train their sales associates and ultimately, get better sales results.
And what is it like working in the AI space, right? Every day, we were talking before we started recording, every day it's something new. Every day platforms change, new things come out, disruptors come, right? What is it like working in that space? And then how do you transition what you're learning there into the courses you're teaching here at Quinnipiac and how you're preparing students to go out into a world where this will be there every day too?
Yeah. It's exciting, honestly. I love the AI space because it's so fast moving. So to give you an example, when I first started that company, and the impetus, the idea for that company actually came from interactions here at the medical school, because here at the medical school at Quinnipiac, this is actually how it started. At the medical school here at Quinnipiac, a lot of time is spent working with so-called standardized patients. These are actors. They hire actors to pretend to be a patient with physical ailments or with mental health ailments, and they have a script. They learn that, and they come in and they do the role play with the doctors or nurses
in the physical simulated space.
Exactly. And so I realized at the medical school this could be just as well used, right? Using AI instead of actors, because students really benefit from this role play. And so this idea came out of that, and I started building the first prototype. But at the time, video avatars weren't good enough yet. And literally, I think it was 3 months afterwards, the video avatars became much better, much more realistic. You could have interactive avatars, which you couldn't do. It was last year. It happened within a few months. It was crazy. So when summer came around, I had to basically scratch the entire prototype I had built up until then, which was audio only, and switch over to avatar-based and add video. So, and that's just exciting to me. I mean, again, when you're a solo entrepreneur or in a small team, you can change quickly. You're nimble. That's your big advantage, right? So when I realized that the market is changing, something new is available, I jump on it. I try it out. If it fits, I adopt it, because as a company, we want to provide the best experience possible to our clients. But that also translates very much to what's happening in the classroom, in my own classroom, but what I also see broader at Quinnipiac. So in my own classrooms, even like it was like I think 1.5 years ago when we were just realizing how AI is changing teaching, what I had done is I had created a custom chatbot for one of my courses, in particular for one of my online courses, an online R programming course, where I realized quickly that students would go online to look for answers. That's normal, right? But the problem is when you're learning a new programming language, there are different styles of using variables and writing code. So I wanted students to get the right answers from my style of writing the code, right? Because it fits with my examples, fits with my teaching. So I built a custom chatbot that would ingest all of my learning materials that I provided with, and then students were able to ask it questions, and it would respond in a way that mimics what I would say if I were to respond in an email. Again, it was an online class, asynchronous. So students, they didn't see me in the classroom, and they would write me emails with questions. But then let's say if they write me an email, like, at midnight, I wouldn't respond until the next morning. And I didn't want students to be held back by this sort of time delay. So I built this custom chatbot. So they were able to ask these questions and get responses right back and in the same style as if I had written it and if it was coming directly from me. So I ended up doing research around that as well to see, what students liked about it, what we can improve. And that's a whole different story. But anyway, so the point is here, in my classes, and that was back then, but even today, I try out new AI tools all the time. I think the only way that we can, move forward is to experiment, because things change so fast. That's true for business, but it's also true for what we're doing in the classroom. So we got to keep trying new things and see what works, basically.
And for anybody out there, for students who want to be an entrepreneur, but they need a partner, You have a saying, and I want you to say it here. What advice would you give them as they're looking for someone to partner up to unlock their idea and make it happen?
Yeah, it's tough. So I wish I had good advice. But honestly, to me, finding a partner in business, like finding a partner in life, I'm not aware of any algorithm or shortcut that gets you there.
No AI yet.
No. I'm sure they're working on that.
Yeah.
No, but honestly, it's tough. It's really tough. I mean, I had, I was fortunate to have good experiences, good co-founders, which isn't to say that there aren't disagreements and such. That's like in a marriage, right? Or in a relationship, you have disagreements and it's tough. But honestly, what I found is try to find someone who complements your skill, right? So I don't know, if you have no technical skills, then try to find someone who has them, right? If you don't know marketing, then try to find someone who knows marketing. Whatever it is that you lack, so you got to be very sort of honest about what you're good at and what you're not good at, so that you can find a partner or partners that can complement you with the skills that you're lacking. But at the same time, you should be also good friends together. You want to be able to, you spend a lot of time with that person or these people. So you want to, you should like them. They should like you. You should get along. Which is, again, sort of general advice, I guess, but it's not easy to find the right person, honestly. Just like in dating or in life, it's not so easy. No easy answer there.
So you have all of these entrepreneurship ventures, successful and unsuccessful, teaching experience and research. How do all these things come together and impact the teaching and learning environment that you bring for your students?
So honestly, my classes are very hands-on. So just like an entrepreneur, when you start off, it's just you or maybe with a small team, you got to be willing to roll up your sleeves and just do it. So all of my classes are very much, let's roll up our sleeves and do it together. So instead of me lecturing, so I think this kind of talking is probably the most talking that you'll ever get from me in a classroom. It's going to be much more me walking around and helping students. We're trying to solve problems together. I show them how to do it, but ultimately it's them doing it. And I'm there to troubleshoot, to help them along the way. So for me, it's all about sort of bringing together what I've done in my entrepreneurial ventures, which I share with my students, of course, as well, right? I try to relate and bring back the stories that some of them that I just shared with you, but many others into the classroom. But ultimately, being an entrepreneur means, being able to do something, do it, right? You gotta roll up your sleeves. So the classes are very hands-on that I have. Being very international with my experiences, I can relate very well to students that have international backgrounds, or even those that aspire to have them. I can share those experiences as well. But I try to basically be able to relate and always go back to what we talked about in the beginning, which is, would I want to be in this class, right? How can I make this class the most fun, the most experiential learning experience possible, so that, if I were a student in my class, I would enjoy it, right? I would want them to be there. And so again, it's about hands-on, using that engagement, that interaction that I provide. And it's really experiential learning that I think is the best way, especially now in the age of AI, where the old ways of doing things of, multiple choice exams, not in my class. Actually, I shy away from any kinds of standardized exams because AI can do this stuff, right? This is no longer how we should assess learning. So I really focus on project-based work where students work individually or in small teams, and I'm there to guide them along the way. I think that kind of learning is really what needs to happen in all classrooms, to be honest with you.
Simulating what they would find out in the
real world. Exactly, right? We have to be mimicking what's happening in the real world. So we're using all the tools. And again, being an entrepreneur, I leverage whatever's available, right? And if new things become available, I integrate that in my work. Same in the classroom. I leverage whatever tools are available. If new ones become available, even mid-semester, I bring them in. Granted, sometimes, we try something out and it doesn't work, which is fine too, because we can learn from that all together as well, right? So I think students, they're part of that journey and part of the experience, but it's a fun one. It's a fun ride. I love what I'm doing, honestly.
And I'm sure it's rewarding seeing your students graduate, succeed, have their own ventures.
That's true.
And maybe come back and visit your classes, or at least just keep in touch.
Yes. And I do advise students as well. So students oftentimes come to me with questions around entrepreneurial ideas. I was involved in the early days when we had the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship starting off here at Quinnipiac. So I'm very much always telling students, if you have any ideas for startups, products, come to me, especially around digital, obviously. And my door is always open. So I'm excited to work with any student that comes in with ideas. I did the same in my college years and later. So I'm always excited when I see students that have ideas. I'm there to help them get them off the ground.
Well, that's awesome that you provide that environment for students in your courses. And unfortunately, that brings us to the end of our time today, Guido. We could talk all day about AI and et cetera, but thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap for this episode of Who Are You? If you like today's episode, be sure to like and subscribe and find other episodes on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube podcasts, or wherever else you find your favorite podcasts. Until next time, when I ask my next guest, who are you? Bye for now.